truth is, oh, sorry, I just jumped in. um, is that we look at history through our family, when we get brought up by people who don't have careful language or, have books around like Mein Kampf, you can pick up about. I mean, I thought Tony Robinson was a decent person, then you look into things a little bit more. And the thing is, nobody looks into people a little bit more or on the internet about somebody a little bit more now. We just take the word of the media on YouTube or a forum we follow. The kids get on forums, don't they? I don't understand. But it starts with like your ignorance is there to begin with. But, you think because you've read a few books and you've listened to your granddad that, it's a valued history lesson. And then you read on in life and you think it's like with the Bible. It's a storybook of how to live, what to live by, how all that Jesus was powerful. He was just a man. But it's what he lived by, right? So but that's how I see it. But a lot of people would see that as a fairy tale, right? Like Greek history. There has mythology in things, but these things are used in Nazi, like the symbolism. At first you might not notice that it's a far right organisation. It's the language they use as well. Very possessive nouns, like a bit like the LGBT community. They have that language, So it's you've got to keep on your own track. You can't get mixed up with taking a side on these things because the history not repeating itself is choosing your own path, like the Lord says, like the Bible says, be on your own path, stick to your own path, stick to what you feels right, keep it inside, sometimes is wiser, but I wouldn't say I was a highly religious person. I'm just a person who studied theology a bit more than most, and it's given me respect for people. It's given me respect where my daughter, I've taken a little bit from this, from this documentary, not let her get into that own world of going upstairs all the time. And she is. It's getting that way where she's disrespecting me. And I'm not used to that type of BS, I'll be honest with you. I'm very straight to the point. I'm strict. Fair. But I can see a change in our children. They're getting more and more radicalised by one or the other. And it's got to be you've got to be a label. You've got to pick a side. You've got to pick the right side that's good, and whatever's good in your expectations as a young person isn't developed until like you're a lot older, and even then it catches you out. Like look at Trump, he talks a good talk. Hitler was like that too, That's what I mean. These people aren't to make fun of, they're not. And to an antisocial person, your fuel is your hate and your bitterness. You see, I think that's where I'm wrong. I have autism or something because I don't have any of that. But then I have a complete sadness when I look at things. So then, I do think it's a rush of adrenaline. The hate is a rush of adrenaline in these guys. I don't think they're any different than anyone else, though. It's like it just guides them in the wrong way. These forums are always a reoccurrence, aren't they? I'm glad I've never been swallowed in younger. It's pretty hard for kids now. I'd say a lot more than it was back when I was younger. When the first mass shooting happened, it was actually in England. And it was in Scotland, and Dunblane was I think 96, and then you had the other one not far after, or before it, just around that period in America. And he killed, and he was apparently a bad person, but older, and he shot all primary school children, all of them, in one classroom. So, and the consequence of that after it seems a lot to do with hatred, anger, internet, like-minded people, and then like chaos.
They intercepted the Operation Waffenkraft group shortly before a planned attack.
These are the 7 most powerful men in China. They represent the top leadership positions of the ruling party, and their identities are revealed every 5 years at a carefully choreographed political event called the National Congress.
China's Communist Party unveils its new leadership over the next 5 years.
The order of appearance is symbolic. The first person to emerge is the head of the party for the next 5 years. At the most recent event in October 2022, that person was Xi Jinping, China's president for the last 10 years, who walked out in the top spot a historic 3rd time after getting rid of China's presidential term limit that restricted all his predecessors to 2 terms. A signal that he may be planning to stay in power for life. The world hasn't seen a Chinese leader like this since Mao Zedong, the revolutionary founder of the People's Republic of China, whose ruthless dictatorship scarred the Chinese people for generations. Xi has been compared to Mao a lot, and he clearly draws from Mao's playbook. But there's something else that connects these two. When Xi was just a young boy, Mao ruined his life. Generations apart, their paths crossed unexpectedly, and a teenage Xi from an elite family in Beijing ended up in exile, condemned to hard labor in the countryside. 50 years later, Xi is one of the most powerful political figures in the world and the only leader since Mao to have unchecked power over China. So, how did he go from being banished in his country to taking complete control of it?
With HelloFresh, I get delicious home-cooked meals without the stress. No, we're not having burnt fish fingers and chips for dinner again. And the best part, we actually sit down together. Less time worrying about dinner and more time enjoying it. That's why I love HelloFresh.
Xi Jinping's connection to Mao formed long before Xi was even born. It goes back to when a bloody civil war was raging in China. A group of radical communist revolutionaries, including Mao, gained influence over large swaths of mainland China and controlled a communist military called the Red Army that fought the Nationalist Party ruling the Republic of China at the time. At this point, the communists were losing bad. The bulk of their army was pinned down here, in a communist-controlled region originally established by Mao, now surrounded by nationalist forces. And they were running low on food. So the Red Army decided to launch a bold attack to break through the nationalist forces and evacuate the roughly 130,000 communist soldiers and civilians stuck here. On October 16, 1934, they made their move and attacked a weaker part of the enemy line. They broke through, and even though their numbers quickly dropped, with thousands dying and thousands more fleeing to the countryside, around 86,000 stuck together and pushed on. This was the beginning of a year-long historic retreat called the Long March, the journey to establish a new communist base far from the nationalist forces. Mao, who used to be a military leader, wasn't in charge at this time. He'd insisted on using guerrilla tactics, which had heavily influenced the Red Army earlier in the war, but that approach had fallen out of favor and he was demoted. The Long March changed that. After escaping the siege here, the Red Army continued to suffer relentless attacks by the pursuing nationalist army. The military leaders of the march had pushed for a more traditional wartime strategy of direct confrontation rather than Mao's guerrilla tactics. And the result was catastrophic for the Red Army. Less than half of the original escape group survived the first 3 months alone. So it was at this first stopping point where Communist Party leader Zhou Enlai handed military leadership back to Mao. And Mao picked an endpoint for the march, here, 800 miles away in rural northern China. But they didn't go straight for it. Mao led the Red Army deep into the mountains, where he predicted lighter resistance. And he was right. But the journey was still brutal. It was 9 more months of non-stop marching and fighting along this several thousand-mile route, before they ultimately arrived in northern China, where a guerrilla base led by a communist revolutionary named Shi Zhongshun offered Mao's army refuge, bringing the Long March to an end. That man was Xi Jinping's father. In the end, fewer than 8,000 of the original marchers survived. Even though thousands died on the Long March from starvation, fighting, and disease, Mao's leadership was credited with saving the Red Army from total annihilation, and he became the de facto head of the party as well as the military, entrusted with rebuilding the army to take on the nationalist forces for total control of China.
Wherever and however the Red troops move into battle, they spread the glory of Mao Zedong.
This is a good stopping point in the story to talk about how power in the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, works. Officially, the highest level of authority is a group called the Central Committee, and is responsible for all of the party's major policy decisions. Within the Central Committee is a select group of officials called the Political Bureau, or Politburo. In most communist parties, like that of the former Soviet Union, the Politburo represents the most powerful members of the party besides the General Secretary. But the Chinese Communist Party has a key distinction that makes it unique. It has one more, even smaller selection of top officials who ultimately have the final say, an elite class of Politburo members called the Politburo Standing Committee. This group, which includes the General Secretary, holds supreme control over the Central Committee, dictates the will of the party, and is in full control of the Central Military Commission, which oversees China's defense. Mao's promotion during the Long March landed him here, in the highest position of the military and the Politburo Standing Committee. Even though he was considered the de facto head of the party when the Long March ended in 1935, he officially became head of the party in 1943. With both the party and the military under his control, Mao began to exploit the system to ensure he remained at the top for the rest of his life. At Mao's first National Congress as the official party leader in 1945, the party introduced a resolution that brought his influence to a whole new level. It unified the party around a single understanding of its history and declared Mao's political ideology, later called Mao Zedong thought, or Maoism, as the unquestioned guiding principle of the Chinese Communist Party. Basically, Mao's ideas or policy decisions could no longer be challenged by anyone. It was here he unveiled his equivalent at the time of the Politburo Standing Committee, the four other top party leaders, all long marchers deeply loyal to Mao, like Liu Shaoqi and Zhou Enlai, who'd go on to hold some of the most powerful positions in the future government. 4 years later, Mao declared final victory for the communists in a decades-long Chinese civil war and established a new country, the People's Republic of China, or PRC.
Mao Zedong, once a lowly party worker, now assumed the stature of the dominant figure in all of Eastern Asia.
But winning a revolution isn't the same as running a country.
Because now that you're running a country, there's all these other things you have to do, like deliver the mail and like build a dam and stuff like that. You can't possibly have the party do all these things.
So the party set up a government that would take the policy decisions made by the Politburo Standing Committee and figure out a way to make them a reality.
And so it evolved to a system where the party would make all the important decisions, and especially the Politburo Standing Committee. Then, as it is today, many of these decisions would go to the State Council. So the State Council is the highest decision-making body on the state side, led by the Premier of China.
The Premier of China, by the way, is almost always a member of the Politburo Standing Committee. One way Mao kept a tight grip on power over the years was by promoting those loyal to him to top positions in the party and government, whether they had government experience or not. For example, Zhou Enlai, the former party leader who helped Mao rise to power during the Long March, became China's first premier.
The advantage of that is that they could never challenge him. The disadvantage of that is they didn't know what they were doing, and so administration suffered, policy outcomes suffered.
Long March survivors often became party elites under Mao. Xi Jinping's father, for example, was appointed Secretary General of the State Council. And as the son of a Long Marcher, young Xi was given the informal title of Princeling. Mao succeeded in never giving up his power during his lifetime. His unchecked policies resulted in massive famines and widespread persecution that cost between 40 and 80 million lives over a span of decades, and culminated in the disastrous Cultural Revolution, a violent final attempt from Mao to consolidate his power and force loyalty to the practice of Maoism. The idea was to make himself and his ideas eternal, the way he viewed communist figureheads like Lenin and Marx before him. Anyone that didn't fall in line with Mao's ideology was publicly humiliated, impoverished, excluded from society, and in many cases, executed, either at the hands of the army or by a militant youth group obsessed with enforcing Maoism, the Red Guards. Even those closest to the dictator weren't safe from his purges during the Cultural Revolution. High-level officials, including members of the Politburo Standing Committee and Long Marchers, were removed from their positions. Liu Shaoqi was denounced as a traitor and died while imprisoned under harsh conditions. Mao also removed the chief of staff of the army and replaced him with a Maoist, leaving no one left to oppose him in the military. Mao's handpicked successor, who always appeared loyally by his side in photos and propaganda posters, died under mysterious circumstances when his plane crashed as he was fleeing to the Soviet Union. Mao later denounced him as a traitor. He denounced Xi's father, too. This is a photo of Xi Sr. being restrained and publicly criticized by the Red Guards at the height of the Cultural Revolution. He would remain a prisoner in Beijing for 8 years following this.
So, in terms of salary, you were thinking...
We've indeed set salary expectations from the start.
I have an incredible haul for my favorite sustainable brand, Wolf & Badger, so let's try some pieces. What I love about Wolf & Badger is that they basically offer a shopping platform that brings together sustainability and high fashion. They have over 2,000 independent and ethical brands and designers on their site, so there's something for everyone, no matter your style. And it's a way for conscious consumers to connect with emerging designers, which I just think is so cool. And for me, with time, it's just become increasingly more important to invest in high-quality pieces that I'm going to have for many years that are ethically made to really build out a capsule wardrobe of my own of high-quality staple and statement pieces. And these are some of my new favorites.
With his father purged, Xi Jinping, 15 at the time, was expelled from his elite school in Beijing and sent to work in the countryside.
He had to live in a cave and, do hard manual labor. His food was barely enough for, a growing young person. And Chairman Mao was responsible for all of it.
But then, Mao died. The Cultural Revolution ended. His successor was Deng Xiaoping, one of the Politburo Standing Committee members who was removed from power during the Cultural Revolution, who, just before Mao died, started making a promise to fellow exiled party veterans.
Deng Xiaoping signaled credibly to all the surviving long marchers that he wanted to rehabilitate people. So when Mao died, they all supported the rehabilitation of Deng. And as soon as Deng was rehabilitated, he went ahead and rehabilitated all these people.
With experienced leadership back in place, the party needed to figure out how to prevent something like this from ever happening again. In order to undo Mao's cult of personality, the party introduced a second historical resolution in 1981. It condemned periods of Mao's rule and emphasized a renewed commitment to collective leadership, vowing to oppose the consolidation of power around one person moving forward.
The successors to Mao didn't want a dictatorship, so they divided up these positions and put them in the hands of different people.
Like Mao, Deng kept tight control over the Central Military Commission as its chairman, and held a leadership position in the government, but was never head of state. He never held the highest position in the party either. Instead, he set up a new advisory commission and served as its chairman, which allowed him to influence the party's direction without positioning himself directly on top of it. This allowed a power-sharing structure while still making Deng the de facto leader of China until he stepped down in 1989, following the army's massacre of students protesting in Tiananmen Square.
A protester suddenly ran into the middle of the street and in front of the oncoming tanks.
Anger at Deng Xiaoping, the entire Chinese government, it has the real feeling of rebellion in the streets of Beijing. People want to fight the military out of their city.
Deng and his ideology, which moved away from Maoism, set a precedent of sharing power. He opened up China and established economic ties with these countries, and was the first PRC leader to visit the U.S. in 1979.
Today we take another step in the historic normalization of relations which we have begun this year.
Deng's reforms became the foundation for decades of economic prosperity that led China to having the world's second largest economy over time and being on the verge of becoming the world's next superpower.
Communism is creating a consumer society.
It also reminds you that the standard of living in China is going up. Here, capitalism rules.
One thing power sharing did lead to was a lot of policy innovation and then some degree of decentralization, and both of these things helped China's economy enormously.
Which is why this period of economic growth and reform, stretching over roughly 30 years, is known as the Deng era. And whether he wanted to or not, Deng kept his word and never tried to consolidate absolute power around himself.
He did end up sharing power, and that set the stage for power sharing in the party until the rise of Xi Jinping.
So what was Xi doing all this time? When Mao died in 1976, Xi was back in Beijing, studying communist philosophy. Even though the Chinese Communist Party had ruined Xi's family, he had joined it, just as the Cultural Revolution was winding down. But why?
Personally, he might begrudge Chairman Mao for doing all these terrible things to his family, but I think at this time he also recognized that in the system of the Chinese Communist Party, power is everything. Without power, you're nothing.
But in order to get that power, Xi did something unexpected. He left Beijing.
As his competitors were fiercely competing with each other in the 1980s and 1990s, he sort of got out of their way and went to the provinces.
He took positions in party leadership in rural, poor provinces all around China, where there were no other princelings to compete with. First in Hebei, a poor rural province outside of Beijing, where he easily reached the top spot as party secretary. Then in Fujian, a heavily militarized region where top members of the army were stationed. He moved up the ranks to party secretary here too, before becoming the governor of the province a few years later. After making powerful friends in the military, Xi went here, where he once again assumed the office of party secretary and grew his support on the civilian side. This strategy of moving around didn't just give Xi a leg up in areas where competition was slim, it also gave him credibility as a humble, hardworking party leader, and he cultivated a growing group of supporters who would come back into play years down the line. It was his last stop, and his shortest one, that ultimately got him back to Beijing. A brief stint in the top party spot in Shanghai in 2007, where he rehabilitated the city's image following a high-level corruption scandal. Xi developed a reputation here as a prudent leader who towed the party line. Just 7 months later, he finally returned to Beijing, having been promoted to the all-powerful Politburo Standing Committee.
Basically, the people who were deciding on top leadership at the time, they wanted a princeling, but they didn't want a princeling who was too ambitious or too strong. So Xi Jinping, he was seen as less ambitious because he was willing to go to the countryside and work in lower level positions.
When Xi emerged at the 2007 National Congress and leadership unveiling, he was one of the 9 most powerful men in the country. It was at this moment that his strategic climb, over 17 long years in the countryside, paid off, big time. When the General Secretary stepped down in 2012, Xi emerged at the top spot in the party as China's leader. Now, the elite son of a former revolutionary, turned exiled peasant, turned party darling, was poised to seize control of everything. Like Mao, Xi Jinping believes that rallying around a single figure is crucial to the party's survival, rather than the collective leadership Deng's reforms had normalized. So, pretty much as soon as Xi Jinping came to power, he started getting rid of people.
The news 4 top officials removed for taking bribes was announced on state TV.
Xi Jinping has just sacked his foreign minister, just sacked his defense minister. He's sacked a whole lot of other people at the top of the military establishment.
The former security czar has not been seen in public for more than a year. The investigation against Xu allows the Chinese president to remove those opposed to his reforms.
He launched a major anti-corruption campaign as soon as he took power in late 2012, early 13, which led to the arrest of hundreds of senior level officials, as well as military officers.
These purges targeted Xi's rivals in the party, whose vacant positions he filled with his own supporters.
After this massive purge, Xi Jinping was in very tight control over both the party and also the Chinese military, thereby making him the most powerful leader of the Chinese Communist Party since the death of Mao.
That pattern continued in the second term, where he unveiled 5 new faces of the Politburo Standing Committee, 3 of them with close personal ties to Xi. In 2021, Xi pulled off one of his most dramatic acts yet, to enforce his influence over the Chinese Communist Party. He introduced a 3rd historic resolution that unified the party's ideology around one clear line of thinking: Xi Jinping thought. Xi's personal political ideology would now be the core in the party's thinking, political stance, and action. Basically, Xi Jinping's ideas could no longer be challenged, and they weren't for many years. During Xi's first 10 years in power, the size of China's economy more than doubled. So did average individual income. So did military spending. Under his leadership,
Exchange, hold, and spend over 30 currencies with live rates and low fees using Revolut.
Under his leadership, China's presence on the world stage has grown too, positioning the rising superpower to take on the role of an aggressor externally, reasserting claims over parts of the South China Sea, intimidating Taiwan and Tibet, and stripping democratic process in Hong Kong. Inside its own borders, strict internet censorship and surveillance are widespread, and oppression of Uyghurs, a mostly minority Muslim ethnic group, is marked by human rights abuses. But it wasn't until COVID that Xi saw the first real challenge to his authority.
Anger in China is growing.
Video showing protesters in Xinjiang fed up with China's zero COVID rules. The boldest public challenge yet for leader Xi Jinping.
With these protests all around the country and the party's reputation in peril, Xi reversed the failed policy, but is now faced with a shaky economy and cracks in his unchecked authority. It was just weeks before the widespread protests at the 20th National Congress in 2022 that Xi walked out in the leading position a 3rd time. He'd already locked in the presidency for another 5 years, and unveiled a Politburo Standing Committee completely packed with those loyal to him, after removing the final senior members of the party that had ties to his predecessor. Now, there is no one left in party or military leadership whose ideology differs from Xi.
I don't think anyone can push him out at this point. I think he will be the most powerful leader in China as long as he's alive and conscious.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Atlas. So many teammates worked on this piece. A small army of editors, animators, and researchers helped bring this complicated story into focus. I'd especially like to shout out Raja, one of the key researchers on this piece, who conducted an incredible interview with our expert, Victor Xi. It takes a lot of resources to make these videos, but we publish our work free to watch here because we think journalism should be accessible to everyone. If you believe in keeping journalism free and want to support our continuing work, go to vox.com/give now to make a contribution. Thanks again.
China's highly anticipated 20th Party Congress has wrapped up with great fanfare and few surprises. As expected, Xi Jinping was formally endorsed as leader of the Communist Party of China for an unprecedented 3rd term.
There will be a lot of stability, continuity in terms of the policies, personnel.
其实习主席上台以后的话呢， 是明显感觉到我们整个国家的发展是快速很多。
我是支持习总的这个政策的，因为我们国家的文化特征就是我们是一个团结，或者说是一个群体效应会比较相对比较重的一个国家。
But Xi's popularity is not unanimous.
So there's no question of everybody supporting him. He has enemies.
What does Xi's unprecedented third term mean for the world? And are signs of dissent forming?
The biggest issue is China is a one-man politics. Dictatorship always can make a lot of mistakes.
The party is over. No mixed signals. No ambiguity. At the once in 5 years Party Congress in October, the top decision makers in the Communist Party of China, the 2,300 delegates who represent the 97 million party members, have unanimously chosen Xi Jinping to be the nation's leader for a never-before third term. This was a show of Chinese political solidarity, even as Western powers face upheavals in their governments.
Going forward in the aftermath of the 20th Party Congress and the first plenary session of the new Central Committee will be stability. China will be more united and more stable than ever before. Now, this is happening in the overall global context of instability or even chaos or war versus peace, for example, and financial crisis, currency crisis, energy crisis. Whereas in China, we are going through stability and predictability, certainty, etc.
Apart from being elected for a third term, Xi Jinping has also handpicked each and every member of the top decision-making body, the 7-member Standing Committee who direct all matters, big and small, in China.
These are all competent technocrats to start with, technocrats who have proven capacity, but more than anything else, to Xi Jinping, they are trustworthy. He can trust them, that when they know what has to be done, you can count on them to do it. All I can say is that it is probably too easy just to dismiss them as a bunch of loyalists, yes men, who just do what they're told. I feel that Xi Jinping is probably not that foolish to think that that's the way to run the country.
To pave the way, Xi Jinping's third term, a 2-term limit set by former Premier Deng Xiaoping was removed in 2018. So how did Xi Jinping become the most consequential Chinese leader since Mao Zedong? Dongguan City, Guangdong Province. Edmund Zhang starts his day at work with an inspection of his warehouse, checking that orders are shipped and keeping an eye on quality standards. Today, he and his team are in deep discussions on expanding their network of suppliers in Central Asia. Zhang exports Mao Tai, a distilled Chinese liquor made from the red sorghum grain. Edwin got into the Mao Tai export business some 10 years ago, around the same time that President Xi Jinping launched his signature One Belt, One Road economic policy in 2013. It was a massive infrastructure project to create links between China and the world, reminiscent of the old Silk Roads.
当听到这类型的政策的时候，特别像“一带一路”政策的时候，我们是非常兴奋的。国家推出“一带一路”的政策之后呢，他把200多个国家作为它的一个沿线的一个服务商，一个连线的一个经济的联盟，对于我们自己缺乏这种出口手段的这些企业来说呢，是有非常大的帮助。
Also known as China's national liquor, Mao Tai is served at Chinese state banquets. Demand for this fiery spirit pushed its market value to almost $400 billion in 2022.
同时，对于我们将我们中国酒文化作为一个推广到全世界，也是一个非常有帮助的一个途径。而且特别是在我们出口到像南非这类型的国家，他以前从来没有接触过中国白酒的，但是非常可爱的是，出口到他们国家竟然非常的受欢迎。他觉得中国白酒 very good。
Today, top export markets for Edwin include Africa and Russia, key countries on the Belt and Road Initiative. As Chinese enterprises prospered undersea, his power and popularity rose in tandem. In his first 2 terms, Chinese economic report card was outstanding. From 2012 to 2021, China's GDP doubled. From 2013 to 2021, it grew at an average annual rate of 6.6%, beating the global level of 2.6%. Another significant achievement of Xi Jinping was the anti-corruption campaign. According to the National Supervisory Commission, China's highest corruption investigation agency, almost 5 million people have been investigated in graft-related cases since the campaign began 10 years ago. From the highest-ranking officials to lowliest civil servants, any offender was fair game. As Xi promised to catch tigers and flies.
He's done a lot of things which make the people happy. Anti-corruption is probably the most successful of his programs. The ordinary man who has nothing to do with the government except the local official who happens to be corrupt, and now he sees that the policy is getting rid of these corrupt people and punishing them and bringing in people who are not so corrupt or not corrupt.
He spent the first 5 years of his leadership, 10 years ago to about 5 years ago, very much focused on fighting against corruption. And I would even go on to say that corruption, if untainted, will really bring down the Communist Party of China as a ruling party, or even will bankrupt China as a country. Therefore, it really took tremendous amount of courage on the part of Mr. Xi Jinping to lead the country in this unrelentless campaign against corruption.
Rico Zhang is a venture capitalist based in Dongguan City, Guangdong Province. Since the anti-corruption campaign, he has noticed a significant change in attitude of public officials.
以前我们可能靠关系去赚钱，但是现在只要我们有知识、有好的技能，我相信不管你是在一级市场融资还是二级市场融资，都是非常畅顺的。
关系 or having the right connections, is a euphemism for giving and taking bribes.
所以，习总上来以后，这个时代就需要我们是用正规的方式去付，需要去规范我们的行为，然后需要让我们用一种可持续的方式去付。
Others are more circumspect about the success of the anti-corruption campaign.
4 million people actually, the number although look very big, but it's not as big as we thought because they have 90 million party members in China. The public sector is much bigger than we thought. So 40 million people receive disciplinary actions, maybe just warning, they could recover. So for example, like Mayor Wuhan was asked to leave the office when Wuhan outbreak occurred, but this guy actually later on also gained another position, the same rank. So it means that we need to actually look into this number more carefully.
But for critics, President Xi's corruption drive was a pretense to purge the party of those who would challenge his rule.
He has enemies. He knows that, and enemies know that, and they know when to shut up and when to speak, or at least they think they do. And on the whole, very few people have dared to speak up so far. And those who have done, we know some of them have gone to jail for a long time. So all this is not unknown. We know that the tensions are there.
Nonetheless, on the backs of economic progress and an anti-corruption drive, the Xi administration remains very popular in China. An Edelman study shows that over 90% of Chinese citizens trust their government, the highest among the nations surveyed. But Xi's domestic popularity has not translated on the world stage.
The back of the world will be very much fed up with China's warrior diplomacy. It's not because of China gained more confidence. It's China trying to sell something other countries are not comfortable with.
How will Xi's next 5 years in charge impact China's relationship with the world?
This is the perfect personalized gift. You can personalize them with names of the people you care about in the most perfect way. They're tarnish-free, water and sweat-proof, and I cannot think of a more perfect present for your friend or your sister. I've had mine for years now, and it still looks brand new and always gets compliments.
August 2nd, 2022. The eyes of the world were on the flight path of one particular plane. On board was U.S. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Her destination? Taiwan. When she landed, Speaker Pelosi was the highest-ranking American official to set foot on the island in a quarter of a century. The visit occurred despite fierce objection from the Chinese government.
佩洛西不顾中方的严正警告和反复交涉， 执意窜访台湾，严重冲击中美关系的政治基础。中方宣布包括暂停中美进口。
The trip was not only condemned by officials in Beijing, ordinary Chinese citizens were also angered by what they saw as American provocation. Casey Lee, an entrepreneur in Zhongshan City in Guangdong Province, recalls watching Speaker Pelosi's flight via a live stream on YouTube.
当天晚上，我们公司就在这个位置，全体一起，对吧？全体一起看直播，看 YouTube 直播，看着老人家飞到台湾，从台湾下飞机，然后去到酒店，全程我们都看直播。知道为什么？我们在期待什么呢？在期待他下飞机之前，就把有个飞弹飞过去，我都很期待看到这个画面。但其实事后的话呢，我们觉得很幼稚，给了底线给你，你不能来，你不能来。然后我们中国内地所有人都以为你敢来，我就是把你射下来。
Also in Zhongshan City, YouTuber Alan Fan also witnessed the historic event.
當然，去到最嬲尾嗰一刻，佢真係降落嘅時間，即係我都亦都知道好多中國人啦、國內外國嘅人都好，即係個個都好嬲嘅，包括我自己嗰下，哇唔係嘛，真係你，即係我諗嗰下係咪真係打㗎啦？即係我一路都會喺度睇呢件事，哇死啦！今次點算呢？即係亂㗎啦，一定亂㗎啦。
The Chinese anger over Pelosi's visit and perceived support for Taiwan autonomy reflects a brand of Chinese nationalism, which has become more assertive with Xi's leadership and China's growing prosperity.
Nationalism is totally new to China. The Chinese never really had any concept of being a nation. They have been so weak for so long. When you look at how weak China was 100 years ago, how weak it was 70, 80 years ago, even under Mao Zedong, how weak it was. Economically, it was nothing. 100 odd years ago, they felt they were down. They were prepared to learn from the West, almost everything. All these things they've done in their eyes to modernize and catch up with the West. And the degree of modernization, however, has also led them to nationalism.
At the recently concluded Party Congress, President Xi sounded the portentous destiny of the Communist Party and the Chinese state.
从现在起，中国共产党的中心任务就是团结带领全国各族人民，全面建成社会主义现代化强国，实现第二个百年奋斗目標，以中國式現代化全面推進中華民族偉大復興。
習主席佢上場之後，我會覺得就係佢其實佢做咗好多嘢，或者 put 咗好多 effort 去令到人哋去勤力啲。我唔知應唔應該咁樣去形容啦，即係你會睇到哇，佢都好盡心盡力嘅喎，做嗰啲嘢，即係好多政策啊，好多基建啊，大型嘅項目啊，陸陸續續喺大灣區呢度發生嘅。咁我覺得佢其實係好想搞好中國，亦都好想中國可以富強起嚟。
Alan Fan recently moved to Zhongshan City in Guangdong Province to do YouTube full-time after studying in the UK and a legal career in Hong Kong.
我自己喺呢邊生活咗一段時間啦，咁我就買咗架車。咁原來拍完呢架車，或者俾出邊嘅人睇啦，或者俾我嘅朋友睇咧，哇！呢架乜嘢嚟㗎？點解會哇好惡喎，好有型喎架車，好似戰車、跑車咁樣嗰隻。咁我話係啊，呢架其實係一架國內團隊研發嘅汽車嚟嘅。原來中國大陸依家係有咁多呢啲汽車，哇！真係好先進喎，即係個系統係可以譬如我講係無人泊車。
Alan shares all things Chinese in terms of food, technology, and lifestyle. His goal: help others appreciate China's achievements.
我自己亦都喺外國生活過啦，咁好多時我會覺得中國人好似硬係有少少覺得外國人係叻啲啊、犀利啲啊，或者外國嘅地方唔知點解係特別好啲嘅。但係我喺嗰邊度生活咗一段時間嘅話，我會覺得就係其實有啲嘢佢有佢好，我哋有我哋好。關於呢個文化自信呢樣嘢係近期我見習主席嘅公開嘅場合成日提到嘅一樣嘢。
In a survey of Chinese citizens by the Global Times in 2021, 8% of those interviewed felt that they should look up to the West, compared to 2016, where 38% held the West in high regard. Meanwhile, those who look down on the West have increased to 42%. For 40-year-old Casey Lee, he is thrilled that his country is projecting this confidence on the world stage.
像去年阿拉斯加中美去交谈的时候，就让全世界震惊了。为什么？因为我们中国敢对着美国的外交官说：“你们老毛病要改。”
历史会证明，对中国采取卡脖子的办法来打压的办法，最后受损失的是自己。
那这个问题就惊讶了很多人，包括美国人当场，他们都觉得哇，为什么你敢说这样的话？在我们美国人的印象当中，中国人是不敢这么说的 ，keep low key 这样子。但不是了，我们敢说了，所以他们觉得他们适应不过来了。只是因为他们适应不过来，以为我们以前是羊什么绵羊外交，那现在变成战狼外交。
Wolf warrior diplomacy is a more muscular brand of foreign policy that emerged under Xi Jinping's rule. Named after an action movie, it is seen as more combative and coercive than previous administrations.
Wolf warrior diplomacy is very popular in China because there has been a resurgence of nationalism. The average Chinese, I think, public, the Chinese public wants to see China's interests defended all over the world. They believe that China's been humiliated by foreigners for a long time. Part of the education in China emphasizes that China experienced a period of a century of national humiliation from the time of the Opium Wars in the middle of the 19th century. So they want their diplomats to defend their interests.
But wolf warrior diplomacy has not gone down well with the international community. A Pew study shows that negative perceptions of the Middle Kingdom are near historic highs across developed nations.
Well, the rest of the world is a bit aghast at how uncivil and undiplomatic some of these Chinese officials are. It manifests itself not only on social media, but also in meetings between diplomats, where the Chinese often use very harsh language and tell officials from other countries what they should and should not do.
佩洛西拿所谓民主做幌子。
The language sounds aggressive because they want to show they're not afraid, and they'll show that they're not going to just bow down and kowtow to somebody more powerful. They don't have to. They're not like a small country. They're a powerful country now.
The question then is whether China could become more assertive in Xi's third term, especially on the issue of Taiwan, which the Chinese leader addressed in his opening speech at the 20th Party Congress.
我们坚持以最大诚意，尽最大努力，争取和平统一的前景，但绝不承诺放弃使用武力，保留采取一切必要措施的选项。
His nationalism could mean different things. His nationalism could be we try to realize the Chinese dream. Chinese dream means that we will go back to number one in the world. Then also it's anti-United States. It's anti-Japan. Then in the meantime, they want to conquer Taiwan.
I think that in foreign policy, there is a possibility that Xi Jinping has a legacy issue, that is reunification of Taiwan with the motherland. And we don't know whether this is something he wants to achieve in the next 5 years. I believe it is not, but there are some people who believe that the clock is ticking and China might use force against Taiwan.
We do not want to have a war with anyone. Why should we have a war with the United States? But it's up to the United States to avoid playing the Taiwan card as if Taiwan is a separate sovereign country. Because the 1.4 billion Chinese people will never allow any country and the separatists in Taiwan to take Taiwan away from China.
Speaker Pelosi's visit marked a new low in US-China relations. In the aftermath, China has suspended dialogue with America on military issues, transnational crime, and climate change. But international relations are not the only challenges that face President Xi in his third term. On the domestic front, COVID-0 policies and the housing crisis have put China's economic growth behind the rest of the Asia-Pacific region for the first time in more than 30 years, according to the World Bank.
If one local government goes bankrupt, it's easy. Central government can just help. But if 10 or 100 cities go bankrupt, I don't think the central government can do anything.
How will domestic issues shape Xi's third term?
This year, the true story of a broadband customer who wrestled with destiny, triumphed over the giants of cyberspace, and tasted the elixir of connection.
Who, me?
An epic journey to switch internet provider.
Not really.
A broadband switch that will echo through history.
Nope. It was quick and easy.
Hyper-fast, hyper-reliable.
Who, me?
No, Darren. Hyper-optic full fiber broadband. We're in your corner. Check hyperoptic.com for availability and terms.
Just days before the 20th Communist Party Congress, an unusual sight appeared above the busy streets of Beijing. A banner hung on a bridge, declaring in bold red lettering, "We don't want COVID tests. We want to eat. We don't want cultural revolution. We want reforms. We don't want lockdowns. We want freedom." In a country where civil liberties are tightly controlled, it was an extraordinary show of defiance to Xi Jinping's rule.
Since, of course, the pandemic, there have been other people who are very unhappy with him over his pandemic policies. This lockdown and pandemic, from every report that I have seen, it has caused a lot of misery for lots of people. And I can't imagine these people agreeing with that for very long.
January 23rd, 2020. Just days before the big festive celebrations of the Lunar New Year, China imposed a lockdown on Wuhan, a city of 12 million, to contain the virus that came to be known as SARS-CoV-2. Some 57 million people were quarantined in the Hubei province, including Wuhan and 15 other cities. At the time, the World Health Organization declared it was unprecedented in public health history. Fast forward to November 2022, almost 3 years after the first outbreak, Wuhan is back in lockdown, along with dozens of other cities. Reportedly, about 200 million people across China are living under some form of quarantine. Edwin Zhang's business, exporting of Chinese premium wine Maotai, has felt the harsh bite of China's COVID-0 policy.
疫情对我们的影响还是非常大的，我们就基本上停止了去开拓国外的市场，所以呢，这个是第一个影响。第二个影响呢，就是其实像我们这类型的企业想要突破，还真的是要在国外市场去找机会，因为目前呢，在国外它的一个防疫的政策已经很宽松，但是在国内还是相对比较严格，所以呢，我们呢。在这个过程当中呢，虽然有疫情，但是我们在这个过程当中呢，也做我们一定的部署啊。我们会在这个满洲里去建立我们的一个渠道，也去提前去布局。在这个疫情呢开放之后呢，我们可以马上的就恢复到我们正常的一个外贸水平。
At home, the prolonged rounds of lockdowns have shaken consumer confidence. Retail sales slumped 11% in April 2022, the biggest drop since March 2020.
现在没有什么人买商铺了，为什么呢？因为很多人都消费方面比较消极了，因为说到底，我说打工的没什么钱，做老板的也钱也不是很多，而且现在形势啊，包括国内国情也好，也很不稳定，都希望能够有钱都存着，都放手上这样子，所以消费欲望并不是很高，所以对我们影响会很大。OK， 你没有人出来消费了，以后经济差了以后的话呢，然后政府也没有对于我们这中小企太多支持，所以我们其实对影响很大咯。
The World Bank has further downgraded China's GDP growth in 2022 to 2.8%, set to miss the official target of 5.5% by almost half. There were some hopes that the 20th Party Congress would see relaxation of controls, but instead, President Xi doubled down on the COVID-0 policy.
Everyone knows that zero COVID is not based on science. Every country now already is living with COVID, but China could not do that. China's economy is really slowing down. Looking into different kinds of statistics, I would say that his key challenge will be on domestic arena. A lot of problems. The biggest thing is China rely on economic performance so much in the past. A lot of support come from good economic performance.
And the cracks are beginning to show. From the banner on the bridge to a lockdown unrest in Tibet, and more recently, a migrant worker protest in Guangzhou. But for the most part, the Chinese people remain supportive of the government's COVID policies, at least on the surface.
我支持你的动态清零，因为我是认同国家人民生命至上这一个的。因为你一个国家你要获得民众的对你的信任跟支持的话呢，老百姓的生命的安全感是最重要的，这是我非常支持的。但是的话呢，希望是如果可以有一些政策能够支持我们这些中小企的话呢，那就可能会更好。那所以我们现在刚好是处于一个我们又主动支持也好，被动支持也好，我们也是支持的。但同时的话呢，也面临现在这种经济的情况的话呢，我们也受的压力也很大。
有些时候，你说如果是周边有疫情，那肯定是要控制的，不然不控制的话，可能又会形成一个大规模的群体事件，那时候对经济的影响才是最大的。所以我同意习总的这个动态清零的政策。
He's popular among maybe 60, 70 or more percent. Some people say up to 80% of the people support him. And that is something, of course, which we can observe in the next few years, what he does with this question of dealing with something that is nationwide. Whether that will continue, he will continue to retain the popularity that he had enjoyed before, I do not know.
President Xi's continued popularity then, in his third term, will hinge on China's economic performance. And unlike in his previous 2 tenures, he starts his third facing strong headwinds. From a jaded millennial class opting out of the rat race known as Tanping or lying flat, to a beleaguered real estate market.
A lot of people already refuse to pay mortgage. This is already documented in many cities, not actually say just in one city. But I guess many local government will go bankrupt in the end. Because if they don't get enough central government support, if one local government goes bankrupt, it's easy. Central government can just help. But if 10 or 100 cities go bankrupt, I don't think the central government can do anything.
We do know a lot of domestic problems. How to keep the people satisfied with their standards of living, and that they all have expectations to do better in the next few decades and so on. So to continue to see progress within China, he has to make sure that China's economy continues to grow, and there's enough wealth to redistribute the wealth so that people will feel that they're all getting better off.
At home, I think that he will not be seeking economic growth, but will be seeking more even economic development between rural and urban areas, and he has been pushing this idea of common prosperity, so essentially making the income of people at the lower levels rise and possibly having fewer billionaires.
Perhaps heeding President Xi's directive to address wealth inequality, 10 of China's richest billionaires gave away more than $8 billion to charity this year. And for some China watchers, what's at stake is more than just the CPC's continued popularity.
We also need to observe whether Xi Jinping can satisfy his people. If the economy is really bad, then many people are losing their jobs. They could actually turn against the central government. Then Xi Jinping maybe utilize the opportunity to conquer Taiwan to restore the confidence in him. But if domestic issue is not a big problem, I don't think Xi Jinping will actually invade Taiwan in the near future.
What then does Xi's third term mean to the rest of the world? At the close of the 20th Party Congress, an unusual event marred what should have been a triumphant moment for President Xi. Former leader Hu Jintao was seen escorted off stage by an aide. Speculations about what happened soon spread, from rumors of a power struggle to Hu's lack of applause for Xi. The official position was that Hu was removed as he was suffering ill health. Whatever the real reason may be, the moment was rife with symbolism. With Xi consolidating power in his third term, the 20th Party Congress marked a changing of the guard.
Now, for today, China is very, very different. I think the leaders, generally speaking, are much younger than, for example, compared to the end of the 1970s or early parts of the 1980s. And, for example, when I started to work for Deng Xiaoping in about 1984, the paramount leader Deng Xiaoping was already 82 years old. Now, for President Xi Jinping to reach 82 years old, it will be in 2035. So basically, I think the current leadership is much younger, more vigorous, physically speaking, and as far as the paramount leader, Xi Jinping, is concerned, he could serve all the way for more than 1 decade and will be still only 82 in 2035.
So he has not put anybody in their early to mid-50s on the Standing Committee, and that tells us that at least for the next 5 years, there is no designated successor. 3 of the 7 members of the Standing Committee are Xi Jinping's former personal secretaries. So that is clear evidence that he wanted people close to him, who he has worked with before, on the Standing Committee. This will enable him to focus on his agenda. He will not have to worry about people who are criticizing his policies or trying to block them in some way.
It is with some irony, then, that President Xi's third term was made possible by abolishing the term limits. The 2-term limit, which was mooted by Deng Xiaoping to prevent stagnation in the party.
when Deng Xiaoping launched the reform, he actually purposely tried to remove the influence of older people. Because Deng Xiaoping understands that when you are getting older, your mental health and also your physical health are not so good. Then you could make a lot of mistakes, like Mao Zedong.
There's nothing sacred about 2 terms, 5 years, and so on. The introduction of the 3rd term was entirely Deng Xiaoping's move at the time, after reaction from Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. So it's very new, and there's no historical reason for it. Why 5 years each term? All these were, in a way, Deng Xiaoping invented it all, in a way modeling it himself on the West. I mean, 4 years for America, 5 years for England. But don't forget, Deng Xiaoping didn't really talk about 2 terms to speak of. He, after all, created the thing, and he nominated 2 successors. So this 3rd term thing, I think, was played up too much from external political interpretation, thinking that this is a kind of the Chinese moving towards the Western democratic pattern. But actually, there's nothing democratic about Deng Xiaoping picking Jiang Zemin and then 10 years later, Hu Jintao for another 10 years. So he set up, in fact, for 20 years. So if you look at it from that point of view, Xi Jinping 10 years is nothing compared to Deng Xiaoping's 25 years when he set it up. So I mean, I just want to say, you put it in a context, then it doesn't seem so.
With the conclusion of the 20th Party Congress, Xi's domestic authority is on sure footing. But the picture is quite different on the international front.
It's quite clear from the language used by Xi Jinping in his political report at the 20th Party Congress that he views the international environment as unfavorable toward China. He talked about stormy seas and surging winds and went into length about the fact that there's risks as well as strategic opportunities for China going forward. He is concerned about what he sees as an implacably hostile United States that seeks to contain China's rise.
Just ahead of the 20th Party Congress, the US banned the export of semiconductor chips to China. It was sold as being in the interest of national security, to slow down China's development in artificial intelligence and military technology. As a result, chip imports to China fell some 13% in the first 10 months of the year.
That's a daunting challenge for China going forward. Now, the other thing is how to really survive the headwinds created by one particular country in terms of manhandling China, trying to impose one sanction after another, try to disrupt the supply chain coming out of China, for example. And this also will require a lot of hard work and creative thinking and coordination of all resources in China to beat off this kind of a headwind coming from one particular very large country in the world.
我认为这个中国，并且20大开完以后，跟美国的关系，我觉得很多时候还是看美国怎么做吧。我们更多时候并不是主动的一方，我们是被动的一方。
At the recently concluded G20 summit in Bali, President Xi made his first international appearance after 3 years of pandemic isolation. It was also his maiden moment on the global stage since clinching his 3rd term. The chilly US-China relations appeared to thaw when Presidents Biden and Xi met in person for the first time since the pandemic. The 2 leaders found some common ground, including on Taiwan, where both reiterated the One China policy.
As long as Taiwan does not declare independence, there's no need to fight. So what is the present tension about? The present tension about it seems to me, as the Americans understand it, they would say that they basically want to show that they support a democratic country where the people have expressed their wish to stay separate from China, and therefore, as a democratic country, as a leader of the democratic world, they're committed to support a democracy, and they have this is an ideological argument. And as long as they don't declare independence, the Chinese don't have to do anything. So the status quo is probably the best way forward.
At the summit, President Xi also called for the global community to work together to overcome the present challenges.
I think China will always work with the Western countries, the emerging economies, the developing countries, or the least developed countries in the world, because we do not want to see anyone, any country, any civilization being left behind. And I think every one of us, including we, the Chinese, always need to have the humility. If I want to impose the Chinese system or values or the way doing things onto any other country, we believe it will not work, and we also believe it will backfire.
Well, The rest of the world, I think, has to be concerned about the potential for more assertive Chinese foreign policy. And that could be manifest in any number of ways. It could be more Chinese aggression against India along the border. It could be a more active Chinese policy to alter the international order and the global governance system in ways that is harmful to democracy.
I would think this international challenge will be very big for Xi Jinping. He could not find lots of friends, and also the United States now they dislike China. China also dislike the United States. The fight, the tensions could be very, very strong in the future.
With the conclusion of the 20th Party Congress, President Xi has established himself as the most consequential Chinese leader since Mao Zedong. What he does, domestically and internationally, will shape China and the world for the years to come.
He sees himself as the only person who can put China on a path toward national rejuvenation, an irreversible path. That is his main goal.
我们中国还是因为实业比较好，我们实业基础也很好，是制造强国。那我相信全球也需要我们的这种制造业的基础吧。我们凭着这个制造业基础，一定能够跟各国达成一个比较良好的合作方案吧。我相信在这里面，习总能带领我们寻找到这种平衡点。
Chinese growth will continue, and no country in the world will have any capabilities to prevent the Chinese people from continued economic growth in peace. I think this is the overall direction that President Xi Jinping has laid out for China, for the Communist Party of China, and the whole Chinese nation. And we are confident that we are moving in the right direction, and we will achieve the goals, not only for the benefit of the Chinese people, but equally, if not more importantly, for mankind as a whole.